everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Emma and I'm one of the staff here at Women's Health and Wellbeing Services, and I'm joined by one of our still relatively new therapists. So everyone, this is Kay, and
Hello.
Kay's been working in the area of adolescents and children for quite a few years now. So we thought it would be a fantastic idea to put her on the spot and ask her to answer some of your questions about dealing with back to school nerves. And so we're going to be talking today about children's back to school nerves, but also some parents' back to school nerves as well.
Absolutely, because that's a very common phenomenon, and I think often as parents we think about our children as a priority and we often forget ourselves, so it's really important to take care of yourself as a parent.
Yeah, the flip side to that as well is that often our nerves can really impact on our children, and they can really pick up on that, and something that could potentially be a really exciting time for them can become really quite nerve-wracking as well. So it goes both ways.
It does, and I think rather than get too worried about that as a parent, it's just really important to take care of yourself.
Definitely.
And to be really mindful of your own stress levels and to try and find ways of looking after yourself. And I think one of the best things that you can do as a parent is to actually role model that to your child. So if you want your child to be good at looking after themselves, then as a parent, if you start doing that, that will really help.
Yeah, fab. So before we do so we've got a couple of questions that people have sent in prior to us going live. If you do have questions and you're watching this and you'd like to shoot through some questions, any questions or comments that you type up, we'll be able to try and answer as well. I do always like it when we can put people on the spot. So Kay's had she's had 2 whole minutes to look at these questions. She won't have had any time to look at yours. So yeah, any questions you might have, feel free to shoot them through and we'll do the best we can to answer as many as we can.
Exactly.
Before we get started, we've got just over a week until kids go back to school.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that you wanted to share?
I think just helping the whole family really to get back into a routine. Before school. I know it's hard.
Yeah. And I really suck at it.
Well, a lot of us do, and that's okay. And I guess that's why, especially for those of us that do, it's a good idea to get into some good habits before school goes back, so that the day before school goes back, the kids are in a reasonably good routine of getting up and getting ready and that kind of thing. It can just make it a little bit easier, just so that you're not putting so much pressure on that first day back at school, because let's face it, there's enough nerves for the first day of school without having all of that pressure as well.
So what I'm hearing is I should be starting to wind back bedtimes now rather than waiting until next Sunday night.
I think that would be helpful.
A good start.
And winding back is a really nice way of doing it, because that way, rather than just going from really late to a really early bedtime, you can actually make it a little bit
gradual
earlier,
and slowly,
more gradually each night, so maybe it's not such a big deal for your child.
Okay, note to self.
See how it goes.
Attempt to feed them earlier so I can get them in bed earlier.
And that's the other thing. It means that you're going to have to be a bit more conscious of when you do other things, and maybe plan to have meals earlier and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. And I will admit, I struggle with that. This whole daylight saving thing, and we need an extra hour of daylight. There's so much daylight. I'm already struggling. I had another hour to the day. Yeah. Okay, let's get into some of these questions. How do you help with stress or worry if your child gets a teacher they don't like?
This is a really good question, and it's a hard question. I think, first of all, I would say normalise it. And by that I mean just really encourage your child to talk about how they feel, and rather than trying to stop the anxiety or trying to explain why your child shouldn't be feeling worried, really just listen and hear the feelings. And that's really hard for us as parents, because sometimes that can kind of trigger something in us that we're not comfortable about hearing. So that can be really difficult, and it can be really helpful as a parent if your child does start to talk about difficulties or anxiety, to just learn how to take a few deep breaths and listen as calmly as you can, even though inside you might be feeling quite stressed.
What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Exactly. And trying to fix it, because you know, we want to fix it, of course we do. At the same time, just listening sometimes is enough.
And it is hard, because I think it's our instinct to want to fix it and go, oh, there's nothing to worry about. When you think about it, the reality is you're going into a classroom with people you don't know, a new structure, they've got no idea what they're walking into. It's really quite daunting.
It can be.
Completely understandable that people can feel nervous or anxious about going into a new year.
Absolutely.
Or the fact that the summer holidays are over.
Absolutely.
Really quite anxious about that myself.
And parents have enough trouble with that, and teachers also feel nervous about going back to school. And often, if you can sort of remember back to your own school years, and you know, at the time it feels like it's never going to end. And although we as adults have a good understanding of how things change, our children don't know that yet, and they don't have that same perspective, and they've only been alive a short time, so they don't have that same understanding. I guess another thing to think about is, what's your own response if you find out that your child has a certain teacher? You know, what sort of a face do you make when you find out what teacher your child's going to have? And so it's really important to try and model a sense of confidence, and also a sense of confidence in your child. If you are really always concerned about your child and show a lot of anxiety for how well your child is going to do, then your child's going to get the idea that maybe they can't do it, maybe they're not capable of managing. So express confidence in your child's ability to cope as well.
Awesome. I read something recently that said how you remember, parents, how you react when you first see how the teacher that your children's going to have for the next year can really influence the kind of year that your child will have. So I think we have a lot of power when it comes to that, and having at the very worst, having a neutral reaction to it, but trying to show some kind of excitement that, oh, that's fantastic, I bet you'll have a wonderful year with her, when on the inside you're going, oh God, really? I've heard such terrible things. And the other thing is that sometimes we've heard such terrible things, but that's other people's experiences. So we need sometimes as adults to give people a chance for us to see who they actually are, rather than basing our judgment on somebody else's experiences. So
that's so true.
So hard, but it is. It can be difficult.
But I think most of us will have experiences of situations where we've found something to be completely opposite to what we've heard, and have had a really positive experience with some situation that somebody else has found really negative. So we are all different. And it all depends on how we cope on any given day. So it's good to be open to things, and to encourage our children to challenge themselves a bit at times.
And I know with one of my children who does have quite a bit of anxiety, we used to have little acronyms for, you know, different ways that if you come into a situation where you are feeling anxious, what can you remember to do? And his acronym, I haven't used it for a little while, so I'm struggling to remember what the acronym was. I think it was SETS, and it was stand up tall, make eye contact, talk to people, and there was another one at the end of it. But you know, just a little thing that he could remember, which then if he was feeling nervous, he knew, well, that's okay. I just need to take a deep breath and I can do this. So little things that you can kind of go, which comes back to, I sort of remembered that because you said, show your child that you have confidence in them. He knew that if I could say, don't forget SETS, and then he'll go, I've got this, because I know that in this situation I can do it, and this is how I can
do. That's a fabulous idea.
So I think if you know, we all know our children the best. We're the experts in our children. So having those little things that we can give them to remind them that they're awesome and they've got this. Even though sometimes you feel really scared, we know that you can do it. So yeah.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Well, it worked mainly at times, sometimes.
It doesn't always.
It doesn't always work.
Every time. No.
But if it gives them something.
Yeah.
Okay, so if a child is upset in the morning, are you best to stay with them or leave the teacher to settle them into class?
This is another tricky question, and I guess, like you said, you know your child. What do you think would be the most helpful thing to do with your child? If your child responds well to you being there for a few minutes and then can let you go without too much trouble, it's probably a good idea. If not, if they just want to hang on to your bottom of your trousers while you're walking out, maybe it's not such a good idea. And I guess it really does depend. It depends on how your child manages. But I think my experience is that most teachers would say
left for the very first time as well, and often there is some of the emotion that comes from parents that oh, my baby's going to kindy.
That's true. I think some of that is about us as parents, and I think we need to learn how to manage our own feelings, as well as to help our child to manage theirs. And sometimes having something that you can give your child to hang on to, I don't know whether it's maybe a necklace or some object that might help them that belongs to you, or just reminding them that they're going to see you again in a very short time, and reminding yourself that they'll get used to this. It won't last forever, so even though they might really struggle at first, it will get better. And once they learn to feel safe and comfortable in the classroom and get to know the teachers and the other kids, that they'll be fine.
I have 3 children, and my youngest is the only one that ever had problems going to school. So the first 2, I dropped them off and they turned around and went, "Bye, Mum!" I was like, oh, okay. They actually cried when I went to pick them up because I didn't want to go home.
Oh gosh.
So I was like,
hard for you.
It was really hard. Thanks. Love you too. But my youngest really struggled, and I know the first day, walking out and leaving her, she was sort of, with the teacher crying. And I was like, nope, I'll sit outside and I'll leave it for 2 minutes. So I sat underneath the window so she couldn't see me, but I could still hear.
Okay.
And I cried for the whole time. and my mum was with me and she cried as well. So that was awesome. So sometimes having support systems doesn't work. No, because we cried together.
Didn't work, but it was nice having her.
It was a thought, but she stopped crying well before I did.
Did she?
But we did then, after that, we drew a heart on both of our hands.
Right.
And we practiced when she was feeling anxious or scared, she would press the heart and come up and give me a really big hug.
Oh,
and then
lovely.
So when she was at school, she'd have the heart and she could press it and she would know that I was feeling,
That's
squeezing her hand
idea.
back and that kind of thing. So we always had that connection.
That's really nice.
So again, trying to find different things for different kids that we're able to try and make them feel that little bit supported as well.
Yeah.
And that even though you're not there, there's still that connection and attachment.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's important.
But it is really difficult. And I think another question that often comes up with that is, if your child is happy and playing, should you actually interrupt them to say goodbye?
Golly, I just try and think back to my own kids' school years, which is quite a while ago. I would think yes, just because if you don't do that and then they suddenly realise that you're gone, they might feel really upset suddenly. And even though it might be harder for you if they get upset when you actually say goodbye, it might be better for them if you do that, because that way it gives them an idea, yes, you're going now.
Well, I think it gives them a bit of freedom as well, that tomorrow when they go to school, they don't have to be worried that Mum's going to disappear without me knowing. So they can go and they can play and they can have fun, and then they can say goodbye. And if you say, I'm leaving now, but I'll be back at 3 o'clock when the bell goes, and you're there at 3 o'clock, they start to learn that you keep your word.
You are trustworthy.
And that's it. As opposed to you sort of sneaking off and, for me personally, I would feel, well, I don't want to go too far from her because what if she goes again and I don't know? So I think it gives them that little bit of security that you're going to know what's happening.
I agree, and I think leaving without saying goodbye could set them up a little bit for some anxiety around you leaving. So I think it's always a good idea to be really open and upfront about things like that, so that your child does learn they can trust you.
Yeah, that's it. Do you have any tips for helping your child make friends if they go into a class with different kids from last year?
Again, a really tricky question. I don't.
There's no easy questions, Kay.
No, there's not.
This is why people are struggling with
That's
them.
right. And you know, the reality is, being a parent is hard. You know, this stuff isn't easy, and
there's no manual.
There's no manual.
There's a lot of pregnancy manuals and birth manuals. I'm like, really? Because the baby grows itself and it's coming out one way or another.
That's right. It's all that.
That's the part of parenting I least needed
50,
a manual
60,
for.
70 years afterwards. That's the really hard bit.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is hard, and I think often as parents you're kind of making these decisions on the run, you know. You don't get half an hour, 10 minutes, 10 seconds to think about it. You're in it and you're dealing with a really upset or anxious child, and you've got to kind of think on your feet. And I guess going with what feels right is often a good idea, going with your own intuition, but reminding your child too that they made so many friends in the past. You know, remember when you at playgroup, and then you made friends with these people, and remember how that felt. Remind your child that they do have the skills and abilities to do that. The other thing I think is good to remember is everybody's probably feeling anxious or nervous about going back to school, including teachers. And there may well be some new children in the class, and those are often kids who are really looking for a new friend. So if you can find a child that's new to the school or new to the area, there's somebody that's going to be really open to having a friend. And so making friends with that child can be a good way of going. And also to help your child to try something new, you know, whether it's go and play out on the oval where maybe you don't normally play, but there might be a game that you can get involved with that's not too hard. You don't have to talk too much. Maybe you can just start kicking a ball around with some kids that are doing that, and that's a way of just breaking down some barriers and trying something a bit different as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you said before, it's good to remind kids that, you know, before last year you didn't know Sandra.
Exactly.
So if you hadn't have gone into a class with Sandra, you never would have got to be friends with her. So I wonder how many new friends you'll be able to make this year. And, you know, that kind of thing, and making it a little bit exciting.
Being more positive about it instead of it's always negative and hard.
And I think it's a really good tip as well. And it's something that we see with adults. It's really hard as an adult to go up and go, can I play with you? You know?
Exactly.
But whereas with something like an activity, it takes away the need to make eye contact or to be, you know, to actually have to have a personal conversation. Whereas if you go, do you want to go and play dollies with Millie today?
Yes.
Or, you know, Millie's in the dress-up corner. Why don't you go and play? It's the activity that they're sharing. Rather than having to have a deep and meaningful. And that creates an experience which is a bit more relaxing, a bit less stressful, and it's just about doing stuff together rather than I'm trying to make friends. That's it. Definitely.
But you're right, it's hard as adults.
It's really hard as adults.
Really
Definitely.
Is.
Taking applications for new friends.
Always.
Submit.
Always.
Are there some good things to do with your child in the lead up to going back to school? Are you best to talk about it a lot or not really discuss it too much?
Okay, so there are lots of great things you can do before going back to school, and if there have been any things on your list that you haven't done, if there are any activities that your kids really like to do, those are some things that you could try. There are some really great mindfulness or meditation apps that you can get, and helping your child to learn how to do that is wonderful. And learning how to do it yourself is actually really good for you as well.
Yeah.
And you know, YouTube also has a bunch of videos that you can try, even for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, if you learn how to do some deep breathing or some visualization, that can be
It's
really
interesting
helpful.
because so I'm 38, I think, but I sometimes get that wrong. So I've been breathing for 38 years.
Right.
But you do actually have to learn how to breathe properly. You have to learn how to take nice, deep, relaxing breaths, so you don't actually hyperventilate.
Absolutely.
So although it seems a bit silly to watch a YouTube video for breathing,
yes,
we know how to do it. Same as walking, we all know how to do it, but actually there is a correct technique for doing these things, and sometimes it is useful to check in and see if there's a way to improve it.
And research has actually shown that if you are able to relax your body, it's very difficult to be anxious or stressed mentally.
Yeah.
And one of the quickest and easiest ways to do that is to breathe deeply. And most people will try and breathe deeply by trying to take in a deep breath. And what it could be really helpful to try is learning how to breathe out for a long time until you're nearly going blue in the face. And then that helps you to breathe in more deeply as well. So if you ever are having any trouble with anxiety or shallow breathing, just try and sort of breathe out for a long time first.
And I read something about that. That one of the reasons that it's helpful is you've had that air in you for however long. There's no oxygen left in it. You've got to push it all out so you can take in some nice fresh breath and get all the benefits from that as well.
And that then helps our brain to work better, because we think a lot better when we're not so stressed.
Yeah. One of the other activities that I do when I'm taking my kids to school, if they are feeling a bit anxious, as we're walking through, so I'm quite lucky in that my 3 kids still let me walk all of them into school.
That's nice.
It is lovely. So as we're walking in, we'll go through and do 5 things that they can see.
Oh yes.
4 things they can hear, 3 things they can smell, 2 things they can feel, and then 1 thing they can taste. So we'll go through, and you can do that in sort of any order of those senses, but it helps you take a moment to actually take a look at your surroundings and work out what's going on and really ground with where you are, as opposed to just focusing on those anxiety feelings. So, and that's something that you can do literally anywhere. Just go through your senses and you can do it with, like, look at the flower. How many different colours can you see on the flower? And those small things to help just pull everything back to just now.
Yes.
And let all the rest of it go and just focus on the flower.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, that sounds great. And the reason that mindfulness is so helpful is keeping in the present moment means that we're not focusing on the past, which is often where depression comes in, or we're not worrying about the future, which is often about anxiety. So if we're not stuck in the past or the future, but we can be really present where we are, we're less likely to be anxious and depressed, which is quite amazing, really. The other parts to that question, I think, are really hard.
It's really hard. Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Because are you best to talk about school a lot or not too much? And again, it kind of depends on your child.
Yeah.
Some children may be dead set against talking about school, and you know, it's really about what you think is worth making into an argument and what's not. If you're probably going to go and buy school supplies or uniforms or something, then you're probably going to have to talk about it then. So maybe you want to keep those conversations for then, or you know, you helping your child get their school bag ready and that kind of thing. For other children, they might be quite happy to talk about it. But even a child that's really, really against talking about it, I think it's useful to start a conversation or checking in with them if there is a good time where you can talk about it, or you might say, look, we do need to get your backpack ready. When can we do that? Can we do that tomorrow? Can we spend 10 minutes? And then while you're doing that, maybe you have a little conversation. So maybe find windows of opportunity rather than a whole big, let's have a huge conversation about school and all the terrible things that you're worried about. Maybe it can be just a little window here and there. Let's talk about this part.
And giving them an out as well, maybe could we do this, could we talk about this tomorrow? Gives them the opportunity to kind of go, okay, well, yeah, we can do that, but you can, if you read the signs that they're getting anxious or upset, I would stop.
Yes.
And the other thing is to maybe find windows where you can talk about the things about going back to school that excite them.
Absolutely.
So what are you most looking forward to about going back to school? Or
yes.
Have you got a new lunchbox you'd like to get? Something
yes.
like that. What are ways that you can find joy or find excitement about going back to school, as opposed to just focusing on this big scary feeling about going back to school?
That's nice. I like that. So bringing things back to the specifics of things that they enjoy, maybe subjects or teachers or friends or something.
And as well, which goes back to one of the other questions, so tips for helping your children make friends if they're in a different class. One of the things that can quite often scare children as they're going into some of the older grades is, what if I'm in a class with none of my friends?
Yes.
Well, remember, we do have shared recess and lunch. So even if they're not in your class, you're not supposed to be talking during maths.
No.
You're actually supposed to be doing maths. So when you're at recess and lunch, you can play with anyone.
Yes,
so it's still okay to be looking forward to playing with Bob at recess.
Absolutely.
And catching up with friends that you haven't managed to see over the break and that kind of thing.
It's good to remember things like that. Yeah.
Which, when I think it's very easy to become overwhelmed and forget that there are positives about it as well.
That's true.
So,
yeah.
And we've got something that's just up on the screen, but I can't read it because I'm too far away. All right, we're all good. Okay, did you have any other thoughts before we say goodbye?
I think probably the most important thing for parents is just to remember to take care of yourself. If you're feeling stressed, and it's really normal and natural that you might be, try and learn to manage some of that yourself, and to do some relaxation or do some things that you enjoy. If you're likely to be really stressed after you take your kids to school, especially the first day, have some plans for what you're going to do after that. Can you go for a coffee with a friend? Can you go and do some bike riding or something that you really enjoy, so that you take care of yourself and model taking care of yourself to your child as well.
And I think most schools now have Facebook groups and Facebook parent groups. So being able to jump on there, if perhaps if you've got children who are going into kindy for the first year or starting a new school, jumping on that and going, hi, I'm a new mum into this year, or any other kindy mums on here. Wondering, is anybody free for a coffee at 9:30 on Monday? And we'll head to the nearest insert coffee shop name. And we can all hang out and cry or celebrate together.
That's a great idea.
So in creating that social connection and social network as well, for some support.
Wow, that's a fantastic idea.
It's always a good idea. And then sometimes coffee can turn into other things, later on, and you end up with a social group with people who you've got things in common with because of the children and that kind of stuff. So
sounds good.
Okay. Anything else, or are we going to say goodbye?
I think that's all from me.
Fantastic. If you've got any other questions around, anything that we do here really, feel free to shoot them through, and we will try and answer questions in a new number of different ways. We are going to be trying to do some Facebook Lives relatively regularly, and we'll let you know what those topics are going to be in advance, so that we can have questions like this and fire them at whoever's lucky enough to be sitting in whichever one of these seats. Let us know what questions you may have, and we'll try and organise a professional to answer those questions. Thanks very much if you are watching this along with us, or if you are watching this later on. And if your children are going back to school or starting school for the very first time, good luck, It's going to be amazing, and they're starting an absolutely fantastic adventure, and I hope that both of you enjoy that together.
Absolutely. And before we go, just to remind people that if you are really worried about your child's mental health, do get some help. Go and see your GP or talk to somebody who can help you to think about whether it might be useful for them to go and see a therapist or a counsellor.
Always. And enjoy the last week of holidays.
Absolutely.